So we're going to talk about building an entrepreneurial ecosystem. We're going to talk about going beyond collisions to build an infrastructure for your entrepreneurs. And I can only speak for like 10 minutes, so I'm going to hit some very high-level things, and then you can go home and think about them. Or you can talk to people that you'll meet next about these concepts, because they know all about them as well. So first of all, we've been working in entrepreneurship for 15 years, just trying to make it easier to be an entrepreneur. So why should we do that? Well, we all know from Kaufman that it is a company that is less than 5 years old that are creating all the net new jobs in our communities today. Companies that are less than 5 years old, creating all the net new jobs, which is why we've seen this explosion in interest in entrepreneurship that's happened since the recession, when we so desperately needed jobs in this community. Well, let's take this a little bit closer to home. This is my hometown. We look at Kansas City. In Kansas City, last year, 2016, this is 2016 data, in 2016, our entrepreneurs, our first-time employers, created 16,325 jobs here in the Kansas City region. Over 5 years, the cohort that started in 2012 through the cohort that started in 2016 created 84,000 jobs, or almost 8% of Kansas City's workforce came out of our entrepreneurs in the last 5 years. This is why they're important to the work that we do. And another thing we know is that businesses start, businesses stop. Those companies that started and kept growing picked up and covered all the jobs that were lost by the companies who did not. So let's talk about entrepreneurs for a minute. We all know about the big unicorn entrepreneurs, but who really are entrepreneurs in our communities today? Well, we look at it as 4 different types. We have micro enterprises, Main Streeters, innovation-led entrepreneurs, and second-stage entrepreneurs. Our micro-enterprises start small, stay small, might be a daycare and a home, a part-time job that they're doing while the kids are at school, might be a consulting company that's making a lot of revenue, but only 1-2 jobs associated with it. Main Streeters, you know those guys. They make your community vibrant. They are the people that are the restaurateurs and the retailers in your communities, and you know how to find them? Go see who's sponsoring the local soccer team. Those are your Main Streeters, so you know who they are. Second stagers, these are entrepreneurs who have grown a business that has a great process, and they are just ready to take that forward and make it grow. They're generating tons of new jobs in your communities. And then we have the innovation-led. They hang around with the researchers, the universities, the equity financiers. They have the potential to grow big. But what's really, really interesting is we talk a lot about those entrepreneurs, but they're really 1% of the entrepreneurs that we're working with across the country. So think about all these other people as being entrepreneurs as well. So when you came here, you knew that you could get out of your driveway, get onto the little street that took you to the bigger street, get to the airport, buy an airplane ticket, get on that plane, you understand TSA and all of that, you got off the plane and you got here. How did that happen? We have a transportation infrastructure in this country that allows you to not really even think about it. You can just get places. That's because we have an infrastructure that's been built for that. We do not have an entrepreneurial infrastructure in our country. That is why you are thinking about all these things. How do I help my entrepreneurs? I don't know what to do. It's because we haven't built that. This is an interesting diagram. If you take the International Economic Development Council sort of training manuals and you do word clouds on them, and you look at attraction, retention, and creation, you know, we have a wonderful attraction infrastructure in our communities today. We know how to find site selection teams. We know how to market to them. We know how to build the marketing around our community. And we have a pretty standard way of doing that. We've been doing attraction since 1927. In retention, we know how to go out and find those people that are in our area, and we can help them stay and keep their jobs and their businesses in our region. But what do we do with entrepreneurs? And what's really interesting about when you look at the word cloud around entrepreneurs, it's not marketing or workforce retention, it's community. Entrepreneurship is what happens at the intersection between workforce, economic, and community development. That's why when you talk about entrepreneurship, you talk about walkable communities and fun places to be and live and stay. This is the place where you are seeing that intersection between those many different kinds of community development. People say, where do I start? This is my absolute most favorite quote. Win where you stand. Clifton Talbert is an African-American who grew up in segregated Mississippi, who became a very strong and important entrepreneur in our world. And he said, you have to win where you stand. So I know we all want to be Silicon Valley and we all want to be Boston, and I know you guys are probably in the room, so we're all jealous. But you know what? You got to win where you stand. Every entrepreneur has to take advantage of the resources that are right in front of their face, and that's what takes them forward. We as communities need to look at ourselves and say, what assets do we have that we can work with to help our community grow and build entrepreneurship? So I get the opportunity to run around the country and talk to different people, and here are just some things that people have. In Phoenix, Arizona, they said, you know what? We don't care about unicorns. We want to build workhorses. We'll take that $10 million company there. Columbus, Ohio has like 20 Fortune 1000 companies in it. So wouldn't you expect that we would see a lot of corporate involvement in our entrepreneurial ecosystems? And the port of, in Tampa Bay has got all these transportation things going on. So you would expect to see these things involved in entrepreneurship in your community. So go talk to them and see what they're doing. So what assets do you have? You may have tourism assets. You may have mountains and plains. You may have weather that's under 100 degrees at your place that might be kind of good. So there are all kinds of things you can do. So what do you do to build an ecosystem? We think that you can do these 4 things. First of all, identify what you have. Know your assets and know who they are in your community. Make those very visible. Connect the assets together and connect them to your entrepreneurs. Connect them to people who might want to be an entrepreneur. Empower based on what you know from those connections to find the gaps, to fill them, and to bring your community together to collaborate to fill those gaps. And then measure what you've done. Understand where you want to go, where you stand, and understand what you want to measure to move forward. So this may exist, and it does exist, in all of your communities. This particular picture is part of the resource rail or the subway map, or all of the resources in Kansas City lined up in the way that you would access them. And it's a big giant map for Kansas City. But what we've done is we've looked at all the assets that are here and figured out how they fit together and how you flow from one to the other. Now, the very interesting thing is you all in your communities have federal assets that are being paid for by somebody else, and if you're not using them, go get them and bring them to your community. There's massive networks of these across the country. You also have your own internal assets, including the people and the entrepreneurs that are there that you can begin to look at. Next thing you want to do is connect them together, but oh my gosh, there are a lot of these assets. So how do you bring people together? Well, you can do a couple of things. We know regions that run a central hotline. You probably run a central hotline. Who are people calling when they want help with starting and growing a business? That is an amazing place to pick up information about what's going on in your community. So if you can put something in and underneath that hotline, whoever they're calling, and just jot down who's calling, what are they asking for, that's going to tell you a whole lot about your community. Bring together the people that are working on entrepreneurship. Just for lunch, don't expect much, and do it regularly. Get people to understand who else is sitting next to them and what they're working on, and just have that conversation. And it's amazing what comes out of that if you do it regularly. People build trust if you do it regularly. And once you build trust, you can do amazing things with that. Think about a startup weekend, a 1 million cups. And it's very important to really promote any entrepreneur that's in your area through any channel that you have. So you can create a directory, or you can create a network. Directories are great, do it, but they're out of date the minute you get them published. But if you can create a network, you have an ongoing group of services that can help your community grow. If you have a network, you can ask people for information. that puts you in the middle of the data that can help you identify gaps and move your community forward. You can streamline what's going on and continue to go forward. When you activate a network, lots of interesting things happen. In Minnesota, we've got a group of people that just pulled together all the food ag resources across the state, made them visible. Albuquerque's doing some really cool things where they've got network navigators on the streets going to where the entrepreneurs are, helping them with what they're doing and collecting information about what's going on. Colmena 66 is in Puerto Rico. Because they had this network prior to the big hurricane, they've been able to super engage to help their entrepreneurs post-hurricane. So let's talk about measurement for a minute. Understand when you build this, everybody goes right to the jobs, sales increases, tax increases. But what you're doing is you're building a network in your community of assets for entrepreneurs. And sometimes those measures early on are going to be simply things like, how many events do we have? Who's coming? Is anybody listening to my Facebook feed? What's my Twitter stream look like? So you're really looking at the reach of the network and what's happening within your network without getting to the jobs and all that sort of thing. You can measure programs. Often you'll say, I'm going to put an incubator, I'm going to put an accelerator in my community. And you can measure programs. Programs get measured on jobs, sales increases, debt equity, infusion, those kinds of measures. And you can tell if a program's working, if it's generating jobs and sales income for your community. But what happens when you look at your whole community and you say, I just want to make it easier for entrepreneurs to work? What do you measure then? Some things that you might think about measuring are, do we have the capital we need to support our entrepreneurs? Are our resources connected? Where are our hotspots for entrepreneurship from a geographic perspective? And what is our pipeline of innovation to grow forward? And these are measures that you can think about in your community. In Kansas City, we sat down and we're looking currently at about 6 pillars of entrepreneurship and where we sit from perception and other data on these things. Connected resources are considered very strong here. We're very grateful to have the Kauffman Foundation here. We have 240 organizations that support entrepreneurship. We are looking also at awareness of Kansas City as a place to be an entrepreneur, do entrepreneurship, pipeline of innovation, do we have the talent we need to run the companies, network capital, and corporate engagement. Corporate engagement and network capital back in 2011 were considered to be extremely weak. You can see that we've made progress over time in these categories. Our network capital has gone up significantly, and the awareness of Kansas City as a market for entrepreneurship has also gone up. So we measure these things. We have data and information that allows us to measure it. So let me talk about that capital thing for a minute, and it has to do a little bit with where we stand. So Kansas City was very weak in having the capital we needed for our entrepreneurs. And we decided that we were going to figure out, do we have no good investors or do we have no good deals? What's the problem here? And we pulled together that network of organizations, found the data we needed to figure out what was wrong in our capital access. And together as a community, we said we're going to fix this here locally. And we brought together people that could help us do it. We've actually, in the last 3 years, found $1 billion, that's $1 billion with a B, of capital for our entrepreneurs here in the Kansas City region that we did not know about 3 years ago. And we can see the investment going up. We can see that there's more investment from Kansas City that's happening, and we're watching all of this metric go forward. But here's a really good example of working within a community to make something happen that we could never imagine would have happened. So how do you engage with entrepreneurs? Well, figure out what you're best at. Figure out what your community's best at. Seek to collaborate. Entrepreneurship is a contact sport. So collaboration is what it is. Be clear about what you're measuring. And the most important thing you can do as a mayor is to be a champion and to just show up. To have the mayor show up at entrepreneurship events, convene entrepreneurship events, talk to the entrepreneurs. It means so much, and it will grow your community so quickly. And this one is, I only have an hour a week, okay, because I got all this other stuff I got to do. What can you do? Know the resources in your community and be prepared to make a referral. In your back pocket, startup guide. so that when somebody says, I need help with my business, you know exactly where to start them out. An entrepreneur is only as good as their social network when they start. So open up your social networks to them. Your networks are so strong, and most entrepreneurs don't have access to them. So make a connection. It could be their next customer, it could be their next investor, it could be the next person that can help them figure out how to get from point A to point B, or open a door that will take them global. So be that. Attend a meetup, convene a meetup, sponsor a meetup, really important. And celebrate an entrepreneur in your communications. Just every week, talk about one of the entrepreneurs in your community. And it's amazing how these little simple things coming from the top level of the community can make such a difference in building out your ecosystem for the community. So that is my romp through some ideas on building entrepreneurial ecosystems. We just put a book out because I talk about this stuff a lot, and if you're interested in reading more, there are a lot of tactical, practical tips in that, and it gets a lot deeper into a lot of the things that I just talked about.
I'd like to welcome to the stage our Mayor of Kansas City, Mayor James. Thank you so much.
Maria, you've done some pretty wonderful things with SourceLink. You've done some pretty wonderful things with kind of being that one-stop shop for entrepreneurs. So let me ask you a question. First of all, where did the idea come from?
Where did the idea of SourceLink come from?
Yeah.
Okay, now you're making me old. SourceLink started in 2003, and
I've got shoes older than that.
Okay, good. What happened was that between the Kauffman Foundation, the Small Business Administration, and UMKC, there was a strong, UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City, there was this realization that there are all these resources for entrepreneurs in Kansas City. They didn't seem to know how to find them. And if they found them, they found the wrong one. So the perception was, no, there were no resources in Kansas City for entrepreneurs. So we decided we were going to try to fix that problem.
So when you decided you were going to fix the problem, how did you go about gathering all those resources together in order to create that one-stop shop?
So we were probably different at the time in the sense that instead of trying to connect together the entrepreneurs, we said, okay, let's try to connect together all those people that are supporting the entrepreneurs, because it would magnify the ability to get to the entrepreneurs. And so we invited them to a meeting. We had a list, I had a list of 147, right? There were 147 organizations in Kansas City at the time. And we just invited them all to a meeting. About 50 of them showed up, and we said, well, here's what we want to do. We want to make it a better place for entrepreneurs, but here's what I want from you. I want to know what your problems are. What is it that you need? And I got 5 things. The first one was, you know, most people don't know we exist, so we need somebody to help us with awareness. For the most part, our grantors will not allow us to market, which is really a fascinating thing. They wanted to know who the other groups were in the community, because they were really passionate about helping the entrepreneurs, and they wanted to make better referrals to those entrepreneurs. They wanted to know where the gaps were, where are the resources that were missing in entrepreneurship here so they could fix them. They wanted more money, they wanted more funding. And to do that, they also needed to figure out a way to measure economic impact so that they could report to the funders that they had done something well. And so SourceLink was actually started on the fact that we were trying to connect entrepreneurs to resources, but also that we were going to help with those 5 tenets for the resource partners.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So when you started looking at this, and I'm sure that just like any time that I've looked at broad pictures and tried to plug things in and people in, there's always that gap. What was the major gap that you found? What was the big obstacle?
So, you know, it was interesting that when I first started SourceLink, I was meeting with all these support organizations and sitting with them and saying, we'd really like to have you be part of this network so we could collaborate. And they would say, you've come to take me out of business. And I would say, what? And they'd say, well, you've come to find out that we're all doing exactly the same thing, and then you're going to go to the funders and have 6 of us shut down, and you're going to steal all the money. So one of the things that happened right at the beginning is we said, okay, let's do an asset map of what all is here. And once we did that, we realized that there wasn't a lot of duplication of services that were happening, because the funders were very careful about who they were funding and making sure there weren't duplicative services. And for the most part, honestly, there was so much work to do that it would be hard to cover all of it. And so there wasn't a lot of duplication. So when we were able to go back to the community and say, you know what, you're not all doing the same thing, there was like this collective giant sigh of relief. And then everybody sort of settled back and said, okay, let's work together and figure out what we need to do.
Fantastic. So when you got everybody in the same room, you got everybody on the same page, what was step number one? What did you have to do in order to, now that you've gotten people thinking in the same direction, to get everybody actually mobilized in that direction?
In the same direction. So it was interesting, because one of the things that happened early on was that there were 261 training classes offered in the Kansas City region for entrepreneurs. 261. 261, I remember that. So what was interesting is about a third of those were being canceled.
Oh.
Yeah, they just weren't.
For lack of attendance?
Lack of butts and seats, yeah.
Ah.
Okay, so we said, okay, well, let's bring together the 24 groups that are doing training and figure out what's going on. And over a 6-week time frame, we found out that the classes that were getting canceled were the ones that were for companies that were already in business. And honestly, they wouldn't take a day out of their business to come to a training class. Mm-hmm. We found that out. We also found out that we had 10 organizations that were teaching startup training. And 6 of them didn't want to do it, but they thought it needed to be done, right? And so out of that session, what happened is we moved from doing training classes for existing businesses, from doing sit-down training classes to peer networking. And so there was an evolution of a number of peer networking things that were happening amongst the people who were in business already that created just a lot more interest in people showing up. And then of the 10 people that were doing startup classes, 6 of them gladly said to the other 4, why don't you just do them and we'll send anybody who needs startup class to you. And we did a joint promotion around there. So that was something very simple that we did right at the beginning, where you could begin to see how things became more systematic.
Now, I would imagine if they were doing the peer-on-peer type situation, it also had the added benefit of creating some cross-marketing opportunities. Is that right?
Correct.
So has that grown? Has that been a benefit of the overall scheme? And secondarily, are the 4 at that time who were going to do the startup training, are they still doing the startup training, or has that morphed too?
So we've seen a huge evolution in a 15-year time frame. Here in Kansas City, we had the recession, but we also had 2 amazing things happen. We had, of course, the Google Fiber picking the 2 Kansas cities, and we had the chamber saying, we're going to make Kansas City America's most entrepreneurial city. And so there's this moment in time where we have this amazing alignment between 2 mayors, civic leadership, and all of the entrepreneurs that have been wanting for so long to have the support and growth. And so in the last 5 years, we have seen 100 new resources move into the Kansas City market. We've seen many, many changes that have occurred as a result of this alignment of the community around, we are going to be America's most entrepreneurial city. So we have different groups doing training classes. We have different ways of training. You know, early when we started KCSourceLink, incubators were the hot thing, and now it's moved into accelerators. So we're seeing evolution in how we deliver services to entrepreneurs as well. So many changes over time.
So we got mayors from around the country here, and thanks mayors from around the country for being here. We're very lucky and fortunate and happy to have you. What can you offer to them that they're going to be able to take back? Because I know that when mayors are pressed for time and they have budgets and they have people looking over their shoulders and they're out of town, somebody wants to know, well, why were you out of town and what's in it for us? So what's in it for them?
So, you know, here's an example of an awesome mayor, yes, take a bow, who, you know, Sly, you just showed up. You know, when there was an entrepreneurial convening or a meetup, he comes. It's awesome, right? And so, you know, it takes time, but just your being there, you know, brings the media, brings lots of awareness and that sort of thing to the community. But I do think another thing that it brings to your community as you do these things is in 2013, Kansas City was not listed anywhere in any of the top indices around entrepreneurship, right? By 2016, people are starting to really look at Kansas City as a place to do entrepreneurship, and we're hitting all the we're the #1 city for women in tech, and we're the number 4 city for this or 3 city for that. And all of a sudden you're seeing Kansas City pop in all of these. So what does that do for the community? Well, if you notice, we're growing.
Right.
Right? And so we're bringing talent here, and talent is what we need to grow our companies here, whether they're startups or growth. We're seeing corporations move in here because they perceive us to be the place for entrepreneurship. We see the community itself changing their mindset and saying, you know what, we can do this. We're pretty innovative. We're getting recognized for being innovative. And so there are many things that can happen just from supporting that concept of, yeah, we believe in this.
Engage and support.
Yeah.
According to this clock ticking down, we either have something that's going to go off and upset me in 2 minutes, 20 seconds, or we're done in 2 minutes and 18 seconds. So while we still have 2 minutes and 13 seconds, we'll take a quick, short question from somebody that you guys want to have. Make it a question, not a statement, please, if you have something, so that Maria can get you an answer and we may be able to get more than one in. Anybody?
Oh, there's one over here.
Where are you? Stand up. Oh, there you are.
Who pays you?
Who pays her?
Who pays
you?
Who pays me? So when we decided to make Kansas City America's most entrepreneurial city and we got alignment, I actually have about 14 of the largest corporations in Kansas City providing $12,500 a year for 5 years each, for 5 years. And we matched that with a $1 million grant from the Economic Development Administration. And recently Kaufman has joined in as well, and that's where the funding comes for KCSourceLink here at this time.
Next question. Anyone? Right in front of you. Oh.
Before I download your Kindle book, I was just going to ask, did you bring any books with you?
I did not.
No books.
I do have little cards that'll tell you how to get to it, but I didn't bring the book.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Hi, Mayor. Jim Schmidt, Green Bay.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. You talk about this growth of entrepreneurs. Do people really move to a community to be an entrepreneur, or are they in that? Or are they there already and you need to create that environment for the entrepreneur?
The answer is yes to both.
Yes.
Yes. So they're definitely in the environment and we need to do everything we can to do that. But I probably take 4 calls a week now from people that are calling in from outside of Kansas City saying, I'm changing what I'm doing and I would like to know more about how to engage in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we're actually going to start sessions on exploring the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Kansas City just for people who are interested in doing that. Also, we find, as many of you will, that as people change in their lives, they want to go back home. So I talk to a lot of people that want to come back home and be entrepreneurs and have been entrepreneurs other places and are doing that.
And Jim, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge from being at a reception at the Kaufman Center several years back when 4 kids had literally driven in off the highway from Boston, Massachusetts to set up Kansas City as their home base, and I think they're still here. They were doing something with 3D printing.
Handprint.
Was
the name of the company.
Yeah. So they're still here, and there was 4 18, 19-year-olds that showed up out of nowhere from Boston. People move here because of what we offer. They'll move to your cities if you offer something similar. It's a way of getting new talent into the cities, and as we all know as mayors, the new currency of economic development isn't money or major corporations necessarily moving. It's talent coming into your city and setting things up and staying there and building. So, no bombs went off. We're at zeros. You've had the pleasure of listening to what I believe is who I believe is a fascinating, extremely integral part of our entrepreneurial ecosystem. She's also a pretty cool person besides, in Maria Meyer. And again, thank you for coming. Maria, thank you for disseminating the information that you have.
Thanks.
Thank you all.